Alright everyone, so last time we actually have seen variables, and we've seen that we can assign to variables values. It could be numbers, it could be text, which are strings. So in this video we're gonna see that we can assign something else to variables, which are called booleans. And a boolean is exactly, if you come from other languages, you're gonna find that booleans are true and false. And if you're new to programming, don't worry, I'm gonna explain what booleans are. Just let's head into code and see how we can assign variables to booleans. So let's head to Plunker here. Let me clear this, and let's go and remove the second variable. And I'm still having my var, and we're gonna get back this. We have this console log, and my variable, as we said, we could set it to 22, for example, as a number, or we can set it to string like hello between quotations. And also we can set it to something like true. And you might be like asking, what is going on? Isn't that text? You said that you cannot, you know, assign text to a variable. Well, that's not text. Exactly, that's a value called true. It's like a number, but it is a Boolean value. Boolean means it's either true or false. So this is a value, a valid value in JavaScript, which is true, and we're gonna see its uses later on whenever we get into control statements and if statements and for loops and so on, and while loops and all of that. But it's true that true is actually a valid statement. We have also false, and you can see if I run that, I'm gonna get true, which means the value is actually called true. And if I have false, then you see it's false. So this is a third type that we can actually set the variables to. But let me show you something cool. We have a special keyword in JavaScript called typeof. You type it this way. It's a function actually, and it takes a variable and it tells you what type of variable is that. So let me reload, and as you see, it tells you that this is a boolean. Cool, huh? What if I change this into a number, 100? It tells you that it's a number. But what if in other languages you probably see this as integer, but here it's called a number. And what if I say 100.5? It's still a number. So integers and floats in this language, in JavaScript, are actually just numbers. What if I set it to be a string? That's a string now, since it's between quotations. That's not the number 100.5. That's a 100.5 as a text. But we could change that to say hi from script again. And you can see that still says that this is a string. Okay. So now we see typeof and so on. So let me console log. Let me comment this console log, and let me introduce to you a special data structure or special new type that I'm gonna show you. So this is my var, right? We could basically set it to a number, to a string now, or to a boolean. But what if I put it between those square brackets, and then inside of these square brackets, I could say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And let me print that out. My var. Let's see, what do we get? So reload, and oh, it says an array. what is that array? It says an array and it has all the numbers that I just inputted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's going on? What does that mean? So an array is a special type of a data structure or a data storage which allows you to store multiple values at the same variable, which is pretty nice. Instead of just having a number or a single string or a single boolean, you can now have multiple numbers or multiple strings or multiple booleans. And guess what? It can be that it has different types. For example, instead of 4, I could remove 4 and put, for example, a string and call this string hello world, and still will work. And as you see, save it as hello world, and those are numbers, and that means that we can have different types. And I can say, for example, this is false. So now I can have multiple values and still save them at the same variable. So now you see I'm printing every single value from this array, but what if I want to get one value? So it's pretty simple. You use square brackets next to your array name when you're printing it or when you're using it, and then you would have to use a number here, and that number is an index of your value that you're trying to access. So for example, someone might tell me, like, if I want to access value number 1, then I have to use the index 1, right? If someone that is coming from a non-programming world, they probably will tell me, okay, I'm gonna use 1 as an index to get this 1 because it's the first value. But if I do that, basically I'm gonna get 2, which is the second value. So you might be asking, what's going on? Why? But now, if you come from a programming environment, or if you come from a programming life, you will find that we start our indices from 0, which means the first element is actually 0 instead of 1. So now we get 1, and the last element here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, is gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's gonna be 4, which means if I want to access this false, this is gonna be the last value, which gives us false, which displays that we start from index number 0. So those are arrays. Those are pretty cool, and they have a lot of uses, especially in looping and repetition. We're gonna see that in the future, and they're gonna be very handy. So what happens if I try to access an index that is not actually here? What do I mean? Like, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. What if I try to access index number 5, for example? Oh, I get an undefined. As you've seen, let me reload this, and it says here undefined, and you might be asking, what is undefined and what is going on? Undefined means that the variable has not been set. That's that we seen last time in the last video, but now it is the same here because you're trying to access an index which has not been set. It's like saying, okay, I'm having here a comma and then there is nothing, which means basically I have never set this to a value, and that's actually what is going on here. It's the same if I try to access number 6. It's like saying, okay, we have an empty here, and then we have an empty here, and then we say that, and it means that number 6 is not here, and so on. So if we're trying to access a value that is not set in an array, it will give you an undefined. So if we try now to say, okay, what type is an array? So my var is an array, right? So let me see what type is an array, and it will tell you that it's actually an object. And what is going on? What's an object? I'm going to tell you what's an object. An object is a very complex data structure or a data storage. Instead of just saving a number or a boolean, it can actually save very complex data, and an array is a special type of an object because it can hold multiple values, and we're going to get to object right now as well. So let me actually um, talk about objects now, and let me remove this array. Let me talk about objects. So we said that we could say 22, we could set it to a string and type some string inside of that, like hello, or we can also set it to true or false. And we said we can actually talk about, we can set it to be an array, and now we could actually set it to an object. And you can see if I have those literal curly brackets, it will tell you that the type of my var is an object, and which means that this is how you start an object. There are multiple ways to start assigning a variable to an object, but this one is very known, and we're going to talk about objects later on. But here we have a curly brackets, and inside of those curly brackets you might be asking, what do I do inside of those curly brackets? And inside of those curly brackets you would actually type in properties, and properties means are like variables but inside of that variable. So what do you mean? So let me show you. So for example, instead of calling my var, I would call it human, and which means this represents a human, and inside of it I would say a name. It's like a variable name inside of the human, so it's a human name. So let's call it Solomon, and let's say that Solomon here, which is me, has an age of 28, and maybe other car, I would say Nissan, and so on. Okay, so you might be asking, why not create those variables outside and then we can access them? Imagine that using just the human variable you can access all of these, and they're actually encapsulated inside of that object, which means they're all related. This means if we type them outside, as anyone might think, they're not related, but inside of that human, that all of them are basically related. So let me show you, let me show you here what I mean. In console log I could try to print human, and now if I print human, as you see, it's all in one variable. It's very complex and it's all in one variable, and if I reload that it would actually get me the object, and the object has all the variables, the properties inside of it, just like they're like variables but inside of an object. That's why we call them properties, but at the same time it's all encapsulated. It means that this human has all these properties assigned to him and is all related to him. Same as if we have, for example, instead of human, if we have, for example, a car, it might have inside of it a model and a year and release year, and for example a model and a car name, manufacturer, and a lot of other properties that relate the car. But if we set all the properties outside as variables, then they're not related. And if you have multiple, like for example a human, a car, and for example a building, and so on, and you have all those variables unrelated, then everything is gonna get mixed up and it's not maintainable and it's not structured well, then you're gonna have problems during code. But if you have one variable that has all of that contained and it's very encapsulated and very well seen and related, then this makes your life easier and have structure to your code, and everybody could understand what they're doing. That's why here human, age, car name, and that's why you can print this out. But you might ask the question is, how can I access any of these properties alone? We have human, but how can I have his name alone? Then you just have the dot operator and operator dot, and then have the name, and then the name will come out just like any other variable that we had, and it's just a string. And if I actually, for example, say type now, type off human dot name, it will come up as string. As you see, it would come up as string, and that proves to me my point that we have here a very special type of object that contains a normal string inside of it as a property, which is like a variable inside a object there. we could still access the age and see here it will give you a oh, okay, because I have the age as a string, we need to remove these quotations and it will give us a number as we see. So those are properties, and we are gonna actually get in depth with both those are objects, and we're gonna get in depth with objects. They're very complex, but they're easy and they make your life cooler during development and make your programming life and web development life much easier if you understand them. And we're gonna actually talk about them in a later section, but right now I'm gonna talk about something called a strict mode. And you're probably asking, what is a strict mode? So we talked about now variables. So imagine this. If I remove this var keyword, in the beginning I mentioned that we have to use the var keyword to declare a variable, right? But if I remove it, you see it still works. Like, it still outputs age is a number and so on, and it's not giving me an error. So what's going on? So it's because JavaScript is a little bit flexible. If you don't tell it that you want to be strict, then it's gonna try to infer on its own what's going on sometimes. And this is not clean code, and it's gonna be performance-wise not very good. So JavaScript provides a way for you to enforce strict rules that you have to write everything correctly. For example, and that is by providing this string at the top and say strict mode and put it between quotations Okay, I think I made here strict mode. That should give me an error now. I think I'm making a okay, just hold on a second. Strict mode, yes. Oh, okay, it's not strict mode, it's use strict. I'm sorry. That way here we can have see. I'm sorry about that. Strict mode. It's much more cooler. Maybe that's why it's stuck in my head that it's called strict mode. But use strict, which means use strict mode. And now if I try to reload that, it would say uncalled reference assignment to undeclared variable human, and that's what you would get in any other language if you try to actually set a variable before it's even been created. And that's why now we get an error. And if I add the var keyword again, it will work just fine. And now that's why you have to use strict mode, because it actually proves and enforces you to write clean code that does not have any issues at all. And one other thing that I want to talk about other than strict mode that I forgot to talk about when we're talking about variable assignments is dynamic typing. And dynamic typing is basically, we have a variable here, right? It's actually human and it's an object. What if I try to say human after being declared and assigned to actually set it to a number and change its actually type? Would that work? Let's see. Let's get this here and let's actually try to print this first and change this my var to human. Well, let's see what happens here. And as you can see, pretty interestingly, we can do that. That's why JavaScript is a dynamic typed language, which means you can change the variable name, the variable type after it being assigned. For the first time it was an object, and now I've set it to a number and it still works pretty fine. But you should not be doing that often except in special cases, but that will actually not be the case in all scenarios mostly, but you have to know exactly that JavaScript is dynamically typed, and because in many languages you can't do that. Like Java, you set at first that it's int, and you can't just say, okay, a variable after being int, I want to change it to be a float or want to change it to be a string. That does not happen in Java, but in JavaScript you can do that. So this is our first basics part here, and next time we're gonna continue on more basics, and I'll see you next time.